Add the following. 3 plus square root of negative 12 and 7 minus square root of negative 27. So the first thing we should do is to simplify these radicals, and in particular writing them in terms of I. So square root of negative 12 is the same thing as square root of negative 1 times square root of 12, right? We just factored out a negative 1 and split up the radicals, which we can do. So square root of negative 1 is I, and then we have square root of 12. But square root of 12 we can simplify further, right? We can actually factor out a perfect square of 4. So square root of 12 is square root of 4 times square root of 3. So this becomes I times 2 times square root of 3, and how we write it is we write the number first, and then the variable I, and then the square root at the very end. And so doing the same thing with square root of 27, this becomes I times square root of 27, and 27, I believe we can factor out a 9 from it, right? Yeah, so I times square root of 27 is I times square root of 9 times square root of 3. So we get I times 3 times square root of 3. So we get 3I times square root of 3. So now let's replace these expressions in terms of I into the original sum. So we have 3 plus 2I square root of 3, and then plus 7 minus 3I square root of 3. So now, adding these numbers, what we do is we combine the real parts together first. So we get 3 plus 7, and then we add the imaginary parts first. So we get 2I square root of 3 minus 3I square root of 3. And I didn't do anything weird here. I just used the commutative property of addition to just move the terms around. So now 3 plus 7 is equal to 10. And then from here, we can actually factor out an I and a square root of 3, right? So since that's what these two terms have in common. So what's left over when I take out an I and a square root of 3 here is 2. And then here, I'm left with 3, multiplied by I times square root of 3. So simplifying, we get plus 10 plus negative 1 times I square root of 3, which is just 10 minus I square root of 3. And since there's nothing else we can do to combine these two numbers, then this is our final result.